We are really excited about this conference because it is an effort to begin the process of putting into practice something that the United Nations has asked all communities and all countries to do, and that is to put the pursuit of happiness, using the term from Jefferson, to put the pursuit of happiness at the head of their national programs instead of simply the gross domestic product, to seek ways to improve happiness within their countries and their communities, and also to seek ways to measure their success in those endeavors. And we're going to talk quite a lot about that here as well. So this is a very, I think, exciting thing for us to start that process moving in the United States. In doing so, we've also been working with GNH, Gross National Happiness USA in Vermont. They've had a couple of conferences already, and you will hear a little bit later in the program from Tom Barefoot from Gross National Happiness USA. You probably will hear from people off and on, and we always do when we say what we're trying to do is measure happiness and change policies so that our policies are centered on improving happiness and not simply economic growth or the amount of stuff we consume. We often get this kind of reaction: happiness, oh, that seems like a flaky thing. And what does government have to do with happiness? It can't possibly be any matter of policy or of government. This is a common response, and sometimes comes from academics who prefer the term well-being. And I want to say that we use the terms happiness and well-being synonymously, as the idea of a good life, a life well lived, a life in which we are satisfied in many of the important aspects of life and not simply, again, in how much money we make. So many of the academics frown a little bit on the word happiness. They think of it as momentary hedonist pleasure. Just a little kind of worry about this. It's too touchy-feely. We want well-being. Some of the policymakers that we talk to prefer the term quality of life. We mean all of those things. When we're talking about happiness, we are talking in a large sense, in the sense of a satisfied life, a life of being active in the community, involved, and we'll get into many of those things later. So don't be shy about the word happiness. It's one thing that we want to say. If people say, oh, that's something that came from somewhere else, or that's a silly thing, tell them to talk to Thomas Jefferson. Tell them to talk to George Washington or John Adams, all three of whom mentioned that in their opinion, improving the happiness of the population was the chief primary, in fact, sole orthodox purpose of government. So we live in a country, strangely enough, where people are troubled by the term happiness and the relation of happiness to government or policy, but that is precisely the idea, the principle that this country was founded on, and we do not have to back away from that. We need to affirm it over and over again. And one of the ways that we'll do that next year, and we did some of that this year, particularly Tom Barefoot's group in Vermont, Maureen Wilt, you'll hear a little bit about that later today, was to celebrate Pursuit of Happiness Day on April 13th, which happens to be Thomas Jefferson's birthday. Next year, we hope that that will be a really big kind of event that communities, colleges, and so forth will participate in all over the country. And the work of the Happiness Initiative and Laura Musikansky's work, there was just a training session here for many folks prior to the conference to get this out into the communities, to begin to see how to measure it, how to do it, how to create it. I think all of you will find something fascinating in that and hearing about that and becoming part of the Happiness Initiative. When we think about what makes us happy, it turns out that it is not, again, simply money, but many things that have to do with especially social connection, community connection, gratitude, generosity, sharing, altruism. But also simple things like what kind of environment we live in, what kind of access to nature we have, what kind of access to arts and culture and recreation we have, what kind of health we have. And you will learn about all of these things as this conference continues, and you will see the importance of the work of the tiny country of Bhutan, a little place of 750,000 people, little tiny country smack between these big powers, China on the north and India on the south, where some 40 years ago, the king, Jigme Wangchuck, just being crowned on the death of his father, only 16 years old, was asked by an Australian reporter, what are you going to do to increase your country's gross national product? And King Wangchuck said, well, in my opinion, sir, humbly, gross national happiness is more important than gross national product. You know, as we say, kids say the strangest, darndest things. But nonetheless, he was speaking, I think, a lot of truth, and Bhutan has tried to put that into place to learn how to do it, and those are some of the things we're also going to learn about. One of the things that we know is important, and this has a lot to do with the work I've been doing over the years, to happiness is a sense of time balance, a sense of not constantly being frantic and rushed and overworked and pushed. And so I want to mention that this conference here at Seattle U is the first one I've been at and been involved in at Seattle U for 3 years. And the last one, 3 years ago, in 2009, we had a national vacation summit here at Seattle University. And I don't know how many of you know it, but of course this is the summer and it's vacation time, but Americans really get less vacation time than people in virtually any other country in the world. For example, there are only 5, count them, 5 countries in the entire world that do not guarantee at least some paid vacation time for workers. In addition to the United States, those other 4 countries are Suriname and Guyana. Some of you may not even know where Suriname and Guyana are, but in any case, Suriname, Guyana, Nepal, and that paragon of human rights, Burma or Myanmar. That's it. Those are the only countries, along with the US, that do not have a law providing vacation time. And so at that time, we proposed that sort of thing, saying people like time. Gallup poll, for example, shows that Americans are you ready for this? I mean, this is going to come to, I think, as a shock to some of you, but Gallup shows that Americans are 20% happier on weekends than on work days. And they are 30 to 40% happier on holidays than on work days, but we are told that, you know, nose to the grindstone, we can't have this kind of thing. So we had the temerity to propose in Congress in 2009 a bill which was introduced by Congressman Alan Grayson of Florida called the Paid Vacation Act. It was a very modest proposal. It would have given 1 to 2 weeks of paid time off by law to all American workers, depending on the size of the businesses that they worked for or companies that they worked for. And right now, almost 1/3 of American workers don't get paid vacation. And the median number of paid vacation days that American workers take in a year is somewhere around 7. This is like nothing compared to the rest of the world. So we proposed this modest proposal. Congressman Grayson introduced it into Congress in 2009. Some of us were there. You would have thought from the reaction that we were demanding the end of Western civilization as we know it. The responses were things like this: oh my God, they're going to make America a nation of slackers. How can we ever compete in the global economy if people have vacation time? Notwithstanding the fact that everybody we compete with does have it. And some of them went so far as to say, one of the bloggers had one I really loved, and he said, they're trying to turn America into a 21st century, what country? France. Oh my God. Oh, France. They're trying to turn America into a 21st century France, as if we were all going to be forced to appreciate good food and wine. But this is it. I think what this indicates is that there is something in our culture today, and certainly something in our economic system and the pressure and the fear that it causes for people, that says happiness doesn't matter. Pleasure doesn't matter. Enjoying yourself, any of these things don't matter. Having the time to spend with your family and your community, to take care of your health, all of these things are a waste of time. And indeed, if we use gross domestic product as our key measure of success as a country, and we do, if we do, then in fact these things are a waste of time. Because what does gross national product, or gross domestic product as we call it today, measure? It measures the total market value of all goods and services produced in the economy in a given year. The market value, what they can be sold for, the dollar value. So what counts? Well, some of the things that count are things like oil spills. They're good for the GDP because they require us to have expensive cleanups, and they require us to spend lots of money on legal bills. They add more to the GDP than if the oil made it safely to the refinery. Same thing for diseases. The more cancer there is, the more expensive treatment, GDP goes up. Divorce, 2 households, more legal bills, GDP goes up. But what doesn't count for GDP? Well, some of those things that we know make us happiest and healthiest. The time we spend with family and friends, that's a waste of time. No money is spent. So a waste of time as far as the GDP is concerned. Growing our gardens, something that really gives a lot of pleasure to people and additionally is good for their health. Taking a walk out in the woods, if you don't spend money in an expensive health club, doesn't do a darn thing for the GDP. Volunteering in your community, absolutely essential to our health and our welfare as a nation, doesn't count. But this is the primary measurement. We hear it all the time. The GDP went up so much this quarter, et cetera, et cetera. We need a different measure of success. The UN has stated it. They say we need a different economic paradigm, and that is partly the purpose of this conference, is a strategy session to come together and say, what do we want to measure success by? How do we do it differently? How can we not only create new measurements, but how can we create new ways forward so that instead of being, as we are now in the United States, the least healthy of all rich countries, we can be near the top in that category. And this may come as a surprise, but though Americans spend twice as much money as people in any other rich country on health care. In fact, we spend nearly half the entire health care budget of the world. We have the least results to show for it. We are, according to the CIA World Fact Book, the CIA now, we're talking, the CIA World Fact Book, we rank 50th in life expectancy, right behind Bosnia and right above Albania. We are number 1 and number 2 in obesity, so that's one thing. But it is also the case that if you live in the United States today, you have almost twice as much chance after the age of 50 of suffering from heart disease, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, arthritis, and cancer than you would have if you live in Europe. These figures from a long-term study by Emory University reported by the Los Angeles Times. So we're pressured, we're seeing the wrong things in terms of our welfare. We believe somehow that just piling on the stuff, piling on the GDP is going to make us happy, healthy, and wise. It ain't so. And the science shows that, and the science is good. And in the last couple of years, we've had some 30,000 peer-reviewed articles published on the subject of happiness. We are learning a lot about this. You will hear about this. So let me say, let me kind of bring this to a close and talk to you, take you back, and say that, I guess the way to say it is that what a difference 100 years doesn't make. But if we go back to 1912, we see that some of the same conversations about our welfare as a nation, about the things we needed, the things related to the empowerment of women, of immigrants, of a minimum wage, of health care for people. All of those things were being debated in 1912, the year that the Progressive Party began. And one of the things that was really talked about in those days, too, was the whole issue of time. So in early 1912, thousands of workers left the textile mills of Lawrence, Massachusetts, January 11th, 1912, to march in the snowy streets of that city, asking for an increase in their salary from 16 to 18 cents an hour and a decrease in their hours worked from 56 to 54 a week. The slogan, it said that these women, most of them immigrants, carried in banners before them as they marched was, "We want bread and roses too." And I think the GDP measures the bread. I think the bread is about the money, the higher wages. They needed that. They wanted that for their kids. You know, and we still speak of bread colloquially in those terms as money. But they said, we need roses too. We need all those things that makes life worthwhile that aren't measured in stuff and in money. We need health. We need time for art and love and beauty. Their drudging spirits never knew, as the poem from that day puts it. And what seems to have happened to me in this country is that in 100 years, we've forgotten what we knew in 1912. We knew that we needed bread, but we needed roses too. We let the roses wilt, and I think it's time to water them again. Now, we are in troubled times, not just because we're not happy or we're not healthy, but also because we're putting a lot of strain on the planet. How many of you remember the most kind of famous incident from 1912? Anybody want to call that out? Anybody, what was that thing that happened that I think everybody has heard of? It's been in films, it's been everywhere. A big ship, the biggest ship ever built, the unsinkable, the invincible, the magnificent Titanic, left the port of Southampton in Britain and sailed to the Americas on its maiden voyage, and in the middle of the night near Greenland, it was humbled by a block of ice and sent to a watery grave at the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean, killing 1,500 people, and proving that bigger isn't always better, and that nature bats last. And we, today, I think, are living in a Titanic. We have an economy that is a Titanic, that believes that simply getting bigger, getting stronger, getting all of those kinds of things is what works for us and what works for our lives. We got to turn that ship around. We're not going to run into an iceberg this time. We're more likely to be sunk by growing inequality, or war, or climate change. But we've got some important things to do. We need the new economic paradigm that the country of Bhutan and the United Nations have called for in commencing and putting forth their call for all countries to make the pursuit of happiness their goal and to find ways to measure them. So the work starts here. I hope that this conference will turn out a lot of wonderful ideas that we can use in our communities, that we can use in our own lives, because a lot of this is personal, but it's not all personal, and that we can use in our communities. So thanks to all of you. I'm really excited. Of course, like every conference, I think you're going to love our keynote speaker, Eric Weiner, tomorrow, author of The Geography of Bliss. And I'm excited about what we are going to do. I think this is a really significant gathering. Thank you so much.